So this video came to me as a one-off comment a friend told me the other day. He said, why is it that people follow people with money even if it goes against common sense? I kind of thought about it in the light of the recent issues that have been going on in the social media sphere, and a lot of my videos talk about influencers and their dumb antics. I wonder, how the hell are we listening to people who we shouldn't listen to, and still a good amount of people will blindly listen to them? We have Mr. Beast, who had his history of questionable workplace conditions revealed to the public, as well as some of his business practices being brought up and deemed shady at best and unethical at worst. Yet, we still have people glazing this man to the extreme, and to this day, people state that Mr. Beast is a good person because he donates money. Well, you know who else donated a lot of money to charity? A certain island-loving billionaire who must be named. He donated $30 million to charity. Is he a good person? Or what about Dr. Disrespect, who did the biggest self-report in history, and people stayed defending because there is no proof of his cupcake incident, so we didn't believe the accusations. But when Doc self-reported, he threw away the most of the good faith the community had for him, and essentially threw it all away. Even though there isn't any proof of the incident, the fact that Doc would confess makes most people turn heads, and yet there is a small amount of his followers who still defend him. I'm not going to open that can of worms today, but you get the point of how people not only listen, but idolize people as well who shouldn't be idolized. Now, this is a bit of a hard topic to address due to the fact that this puts a bit of a spotlight into a bit of psychology and a lot of learning how people are influenced by people. So now the question is, why do people listen to social media influencers? As well as asking, what are some problems influencers themselves face? I also want to quickly discuss that I am mostly talking about social media influencers like YouTubers, Twitch streamers, and just in general social media influencers. I may also talk about other influencers like TV personalities or political figures, but they are not the main focus of this video. But their presence should not be brushed off because they also do hold large influence over people. So now onto the question. Why do people follow influencers? Well, the answer isn't as simple as you think. It's rather difficult to answer because in history, people have supported popular or powerful figures throughout most of history. But it didn't become a problem until people started realizing that idolizing celebrities was prominent and celebrity worship was a little too real in the last century. Some notable examples would be the Elvis Presley and the Beatles, who had so much influence the news coined the term Beatlemania, where people were so obsessed with these people that it was a whole ass spectacle to see. I find it funny because people out here say that we are the only generation that started this whole parasocial relationship, but it's been around for the longest time and it doesn't seem to stop. If anything, it has evolved and reached new heights. Now we have to differentiate parasocial relationships and celebrity worship a little because they do sound similar in concept, but they are in completely opposite spectrums. Parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships where one person extends emotional energy, interest, and time, and the other party, the persona, is completely unaware of the other's existence. So with that out of the way, celebrity worship is the more extreme side of parasocial relationships where people tend to go off on the deep end, and that often involve more real-life implications like stalking and intrusive behavior. There is a lot of variation and different types. Most of the time, people don't fall into these categories. It's the normal kind of parasocial relationship. And yeah, everyone to a certain extent has someone they look up to or hold in high regards. Don't lie to me and say you weren't sad when MatPat left YouTube or when someone passed away. Or what about Etika and his depressing story? A lot of us remember. A lot of people were worried about his mental health, as well as giving our condolences when he did the unthinkable. Some even felt compelled to honor his memory, even if they never met him, and it is something that people do. Sports fans have a favorite team that they look up to, and celebrate when the team wins, or crash out when the team loses. Now, some people can be more parasocial than others. Most of the time, we are normal about it and don't really pay too much mind because it doesn't really affect us when we follow someone. It isn't particularly unhealthy to be parasocial, but the lines often get blurred, and psychologists say that these kinds of relationships happen when someone has repeated exposure to a public figure, and they grow a sense of admiration or a sense of friendship. People can feel less lonely or socially isolated, and this can often fill the void that is left when people are isolated and don't have much human connection, and this is what eventually becomes the basis of a parasocial relationship. It can make or break someone depending on their self-esteem. NCU's Assistant Professor of Social Psychology in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience, Justin Landley, says, that people's self-esteem has a huge say on how a person develops in this parasocial relationship, and it is often a toss-up to determine whether it will positively or negatively affect someone. This directly affects our social development, and since that time is spent online, people connect with others, and instead of having a normal friend, we tend to fill in the gaps. Or it can be used as a way to bypass any of the hardships that come with forming a friendship, because there will be good and bad things that happen in these friendships, but not parasocial ones, because that closeness isn't really there to begin with. So what tends to happen is that people won't grow mentally or emotionally, which is caused by this warped perception of what friendship truly means. These relationships can go from love and admiration to an obsession. This isn't so bad because this only really reflects a small percentage of people. There are still some wonderful people and communities out there that support these influencers, but that horror comes with this perceived sense of closeness. People can become tribalistic and downright toxic towards anyone that goes against their favorite person. These fans can practically become monsters of their own that are both toxic and aggressive. This is where a toxic community actually becomes a problem that can go to crazy lengths. Take 𝖷𝖕 for example. A lot of fans loved and supported him, and it went very far because people would go do some weird things like get tattoos of him, or some would take it too far by harassing and attacking people who went against them. So 𝖷𝖕 is an example of this, but it can happen to anyone actually. I think that it is to be expected with any community, and that there will be a person who goes too far and above to protect their influencer, and this feeds into a toxic loop cycle. Influencers don't need protection from people who criticize or talk shit about them, yet a lot of fans still feel like a personal attack was made to their person. What happens to these people is that they end up losing their sense of self and become a part of a collective group, and their identity becomes associated with the influencer, which becomes dangerous as that influencer becomes an extension of that person. These types of people tend to be on copium when their favorite celebrity gets criticized, like Mr. Beast was a recent person who was criticized recently and is pending lawsuits that bring to light the terrible things that have happened behind the scenes. People go as far as to defend him by trying to redirect the hate towards others who have done worse, or even deflect because Mr. Beast donates money and he's a nice person. Like, it's so crazy to see how far the glazing goes. Cognitive biases could also be a cause, because people are not about defending their favorite person because of their impression that tends to be positive. Now that's why people who have a good image tend to hide more of the terrible actions, because that person would never, and therefore it's false when the truth gets exposed. Not to mention marketing tactics that could help, like having good PR. Now think about it. If you ignore allegations and never address them, and then no one is going to bring them up with a lot of good faith from the marketing, then people are less inclined to believe allegations. Think for a second, when 𝖷𝖕 was falsely accused of allegations, he was immediately villainized and hated by people who hated him for their own reasons. Or what about a person who was caught? 𝖕𝖕. Before he was caught red-handed in the cupcake incident, people forget that 𝖕𝖕 was actually liked and held in high regard. People actually defended him and were adamant that he was not a creep, even though before everything was brought to light, he was weird and we didn't bat an eye until it was too late. I am not going to defend him. I've already made a video condemning the man, and I believe he can't take back what he did. Although, before everything went down, it was still heavily favored, but his biggest critic, called Raven, was hated for talking about 𝖕𝖕. His initial response from viewers was negative, but he was right. I know the rule, innocent before proven guilty. But my point isn't that, but instead it's the fact that people didn't actually look into it, and 𝖕𝖕 dodged the allegations, and the fact that a sting operation was needed before the internet actually took it seriously. Then there are the other problems which come from the influencer, which makes this problem just as bad, which is when an influencer essentially builds an echo chamber and they get lost in the sauce. This is far too common that we should not take their humble attitude for granted. If you've been on the internet for longer than a day, you can tell that a lot of those who are at the top are doing dumb shit all the time. Those who are at the top sometimes forget where they came from. This can happen when all they get is negative reinforcement from people, because now their life revolves around numbers and impressions, and it becomes easy to lose sight of the things around them. Then there's the other problem of parasocial relationships. We often forget that they can be a two-way street. Both sides can be parasocial, and both sides often experience it. In the last few years, people have been making hit pieces on the dark side of parasocial relationships, or how toxic parasocial relationships are. But YouTubers were looking at it from just one side of it when it comes from the viewer, yet they never reflect on it too much. Ludwig had a popular video called "I Am Not Your Friend," where he would explain how you shouldn't get attached to the people you watch. We also have people trying to get closer to their favorite content creator, and it is natural curiosity to want to peek behind the curtains. But that is a boundary neither side should cross. Sure, you can talk about yourself and other stuff, but remember that content creators are just entertainers, and we have way too many horror stories of stalkers. This is especially true with women who have to worry about the situation, so they take extra precautions when around people because you never know. That is one of the dangers that you can immediately see because it applies to many of these creators who had terrible experiences with fans that range from creepy or weird to downright dangerous. But one person I want to mention is 𝖓𝖕, who is a famous VTuber, and actually, as of recording, she is the #1 creator of Twitch. 𝖓𝖕 said that we often forget that a streamer can also be parasocial. 𝖓𝖕 uses herself as an example because of her past. For those that don't know about her, she has been bedridden for years, and now, because of her condition, she has been vocal that she can't live a normal life. She has been telling her fans the reason why she started streaming.
They talk about how it's like a problem and it's like something that happens a lot, but it's like I don't think anybody's ever considered how it goes both ways. I think I've said this before, because it's like just as much as like some people are like in a parasocial relationship, like so are most streamers and VTubers too. I can't speak for everybody, but I know for me, it's like I started VTubing because I was fucking lonely, and I was in a very lonely, weird part of my life. So it's like I started VTubing for human contact and connection and stuff like that. So it's like, you know, just as much as some people are like, oh, well, I started watching VTubers for this reason, I started doing what I'm doing right now for that reason. So I feel like we have a lot in common.
Influencers deal with stress and a lot of other mental health issues. Sure, we aren't going to beat around the bush, and me right, Hassan.
Yes, a real job can be gruesome, a real job can make you very tired, but a real job doesn't suck the soul out of you, you know what I mean? In the same way that 9 hours of streaming absolutely will.
I work a job, and YouTube isn't as stressful as a 9 to 5 can be, but there are a lot of problems that can come from it, especially when handling fame. When I am on Twitter, I see people who write about how fake people are, or how most people care about themselves so they don't give others a chance. This creates a bit of hostility and tribalism because of how personal streams get. Most streams can and will share some intimate moments with the fans, and that causes this sense of closeness between both the community and the streamer. One doesn't just lose touch with the reality, it's a bit of a process that can happen when people get stuck in their own worlds and they don't mature. Many YouTubers can be used as examples of this. They feel invincible because regardless of whether they're on the right or wrong side of any conflict, it doesn't matter, because as long as the money, love, support is still there, then you practically haven't done anything wrong. It isn't toxic, but it can become toxic when the community starts becoming hostile with people and the influencer starts dodging responsibility, because their fan base not only allows them to get away with it, but actively defends or encourages them. This slowly becomes a terrible place for them because it no longer is about being genuine as long as the money keeps coming in and the support doesn't stop. This is a very difficult problem to solve, and the only real solution is to remove the platform and audience that made them famous in the first place. Let's be real, the average age of streams or content creators is between their 20s to mid-30s, and a lot of them, it's not hard to see people change. Sure, there might be adults, but quite a lot of them tend to be socially inept or change with them consistently being exposed to social media. Quarantine also made it worse for a lot of new streamers on top of rising mental health issues. Sometimes it becomes a recipe for disaster. Logan Paul was carried away from the fame he had being the golden child of YouTube, and has yet to face any real punishment for being a terrible person. His dumbass behavior still persists to this day, and he is still a clown like always. But as long as there is money and attention, then who cares? What about Kick's infamous streamer, Johnny Somali, who is currently being jailed for doing some of the most fucked up shit to a monument in South Korea? Like, come on man, even as a joke, that is not only very inconsiderate and vile, it's also not funny. Then finally, we have Jack Dorothy, who crashed his car live on stream because he was being reckless. Kick did something right and actually perma-banned him, and he has been living off the copium, expecting to get unbanned. Hopefully, he stays away from all social media platforms, but that is uncertain because he immediately went to TikTok to make some more money from his audience. Jack is a bit of a special case since he was popular at such a young age and quickly figured out that sensationalism gets views, so he started to exploit the system. It doesn't help that his parents are enablers, as well as him growing up with this mentality during his early teen years. You learn quickly that you can get views for terrible behavior and how fame can negatively impact the brain. I can't stress that being an influencer or streamer doesn't make your life better, and it should especially not be as glamorized as much as it is. People don't know the mental turmoil that comes with this job. Sure, I might not be big myself, but both my editor and I have seen people lose themselves in this never-ending rat race to fame and fortune. But what do you think? Leave a like, comment, and subscribe.